Welcome to the first of hopefully many episodes of our new series of bite-sized podcasts from Cornwall Insights. We do of course have an ongoing series of longer, more wide-ranging podcasts, and you should definitely check those out. But in this series, we're going to focus in on a specific issue in the market in just a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, which will hopefully fit in nicely with your well-deserved coffee breaks. In this first episode, we're looking at the recent announcement from government that it plans to look at how EVs could be encouraged to participate more in the capacity market. We're going to be thinking about what government could actually do to facilitate this and asking simply whether or not it's a good idea. To help us do this, I'm joined today by Jacob Briggs and James Cunningham from our consultancy team. Could you guys introduce yourselves?
Oh, yeah, I'm Jacob, a senior consultant analyst at Cornwall. I've been at the company about 4 years now and focus generally on kind of bespoke projects around e-mobility and kind of energy services.
Yeah, and I'm James. I've also been at the company about 4 years and I'm a senior consulting analyst in the consulting team with Jacob. Most of my work focuses around kind of flexibility in market revenues, and particularly the capacity market.
Great, thanks guys. And then, so just to kick us off, James, could you introduce what the capacity market is?
Yeah, sure. So the capacity market, or CM, is kind of the main security supply scheme we have in GB. It was brought in a few years ago to try and incentivize new generation or demand-side response capacity on the system, because there were concerns that in the future we were going to have enough and people weren't investing in new assets. So the government decided it was going to provide payments through the capacity market to these generators and DSR providers so they can underpin business cases and incentivize investments to make sure we've got enough generation capacity on the system when needed.
And what kinds of technology have answered that call then?
So it was initially meant to incentivize cleaner thermal capacity, so gas primarily. What we've ended up with is quite a lot of small-scale gas recips, quite a lot of diesel, reciprocating engines as well, some batteries, interconnectors, a little bit of nuclear, and also in the last couple of years we've seen an increasing amount of renewables compete, so wind and solar, primarily because they haven't got access to other subsidy regimes. They've gone to the capacity market as a way of getting a little bit of extra revenue to underpin their business models. And
Jacob, the government's looking at this technology mix at the moment, right? What are they proposing, and specifically what are they proposing around electric vehicles?
Yeah, so I think it was back end of September last year, we saw them kind of publish the results of a consultation that they'd undertaken looking at kind of whether there are any new generating technologies that are kind of capable of contributing to that security of supply piece that aren't already kind of specifically covered off under the different technology categories that are covered in the CM at the moment. So the kind of market came back with tidal and geothermal as kind of some examples or some recommendations of technologies that kind of aren't currently covered that perhaps could be moving forwards. And in their kind of response to that consultation base also kind of noted that another technology that, whilst it wasn't raised by stakeholders in response to the kind of open letter, but that BEIS wanted to kind of see considered further specifically for kind of how it can contribute to security of supply under the capacity mechanism were EVs. So I think particularly kind of looking a bit further forward into the future under, say, like National Grid future energy scenarios where we see millions of EVs connected to the system, what kind of role they could play under the CM in supporting stability.
Okay, so it was my understanding that electric vehicles can compete at the moment, but is that particularly difficult for that type of technology?
Yeah, they can. Well, it's conceivable that you can have capacity from electric vehicles participating in the CM at the minute. You can do that if you kind of aggregate them up within a demand-side response aggregated unit within the capacity market. That's not to say that it's necessarily easy to do, but it's certainly conceivable that you could have EVs or EV charging as a kind of constituent part of a wider demand-side response unit.
So given some of those challenges, what kind of things do you think the government might be looking to do? What kind of policy levers might they be calling on to encourage more EV participation?
Yes, I think, like as Jacob said, at the minute, if they wanted to do it, they'd primarily have to go down the route of being part of a DSR CMU, whether it's the whole thing or part of it, up to them. But it's kind of shoehorning EVs into a technology class that, to my mind, doesn't really reflect it. So I think one of the big things that government could do is bring in a new technology class specifically for electric vehicles. Just because I think the whole point of technology class is it allows you to reflect the likelihood of different technologies being on the system when you need them. And I think EVs will have probably a different profile than typical DSR. And I also think there's probably work that could be done around the metering and the testing regime to prove that they can meet their obligations. Because I think, again, EVs may need a different regime than DSR currently does.
Okay, so a question for both of you then, just to round things off. Do we think that entering electric vehicles into the capacity market is a good idea?
I mean, I think from my perspective, I think there's a significant amount of admin and work that needs to be done before they can get in. I think the whole point of the capacity market is to make sure there's enough generation or DSR capacity on the system when you need it. And I think there's some big question marks around whether EVs will actually be there when you need them. And you'd have to have some heavy assumptions in any kind of plan use case that they would be there, and have to de-risk it quite a lot.
Okay, Jacob, what about from the perspective of the companies that could be entering electric vehicle charging flexibility into the capacity market?
If the answer to that can be yes, we've figured that bit out. Yeah, there's definitely like attraction from participating in the capacity market for the EV site owner operator, for the kind of party that's taken them in to the CM as well. You know, the stability, predictability of the kind of revenue that you can be earning within the CM hugely kind of appealing to kind of offset some of that utilisation risk that can be a barrier to some kind of projects getting away. So there's kind of definitely value there. I suppose perhaps a kind of fundamental question that you'd also have to answer is like, if we think that the CM as is an enduring tool that's kind of fit for purpose for getting us to a net zero system operation, then I think it definitely makes sense to try and bring as many low or potentially zero carbon technologies like EVs can be into that, so that you can kind of operate in the most applicable way possible. But if the answer to that is, well, maybe not, maybe there's a better way, then perhaps that's a more interesting option to try and pursue the kind of different way of securing that same security of supply benefit that the CM has offered under a different product, under a different tool that might be more kind of aligned with that net zero system operation requirement.
Of course, what we haven't even touched on yet is government's latest proposal to make all capacity market units register as balancing mechanism units, and the impact that could have on this whole question of electric vehicles participating in the capacity market. Sadly, we have run out of time today, but if you are interested in that proposal and the potential impacts it could have, James has written a really interesting perspective piece in the latest issue of our weekly Energy Spectrum publication that issued on the 12th of April, well, the latest as we record this at least, so do go and take a look at that. For now, I'll just say thanks for listening. Thanks to James and Jacob for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.
Thanks.
Cheers.